Good morning. I'm Miss Carla. Oh. All right. You probably just got an alert on your phone about public safety in Rhode Island, if you're in Rhode Island, and about trying to prevent the spread of COVID. So let's all do our best, which is what we're doing by having these virtual read-alouds. So last time we finished, a week and a half ago, we finished finally Tunnel of Bones by Victoria Schwab, which was very exciting at the end. So if you haven't finished that playlist up, it's on our YouTube channel, and you can catch the rest of those installments. And now we are going to read Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega. And as I mentioned on the last video, this is a nominee for 2021 upcoming year for the Rhode Island Latino Books Month Award, which is an award for the state of Rhode Island that recognizes Latino authors and illustrators of books for children grades kindergarten through high school. So there's the award is separated into age group. Kindergarten through second grade, third grade through fifth grade, 6th through 8th, and 9th through 12th. And each of those grade groups receives one award. So there's 4 awards altogether, one for each different grade level. So this book is in the 6 through 8 level. I haven't read this one. It's obviously spooky. It's called Ghost Squad. But I wouldn't anticipate that it's any spookier than Tunnel of Bones was, which was pretty spooky. But it's kind of similar to Tunnel of Bones in the fact that there's, kids, and there's ghosts, and there's a cat. So we'll see how it goes. If you want to vote for the winner in this grade group, and you don't have to be in grades 6 through 8. You do have to be a kid. You have to be 18 or under. But if you're in 3rd through 5th grade, but these books appeal to you and you enjoy listening to them or reading them, then that can be the grade level that you vote in. But you have to read 3 books in that grade level. So no matter what grade you're in, you pick the grade level that's most suited to you, and read 3 of the books at least. And then you can vote for your favorite of the ones that you read when voting time comes around next year. So this is grade 6 through 8. So I'm going to read 2 other books in this grade level once we're done with this. And if you listen to all of the read-alouds for that, then you're qualified to vote next year when it's time to pick the best book in grades 6 through 8. I may do more than 3. We'll see how much time we have, and the books are a little bit different. I believe one of them is a graphic novel, which is, harder to do a read aloud for. I'm not sure if I could do that. One of them is a book of poetry, which I could certainly read aloud. I do enjoy poetry. So we might get through that one too. All right, let's get started, as I've only got about 25 minutes before it's time to open the library. Ghost Squad by, now it's probably pronounced Claribel Ortega. That's my best Spanish accent. And let's look at the cover before we start. Look at these kids. Let's see, there's this girl here. She's got really cool style. And I'm not sure if this is a boy or a girl. And there's, oh, look at that fat cat. Can you see the fat cat in the basket of the bicycle? But look where they're riding their bicycles. Can you see? It looks like they're underwater. And there's a building of some kind, but there's definitely some underwater things happening. I think. Doesn't it look like it's underwater? These, maybe they're just floating in the air. I don't know. And then there's ghosts. It's pretty spooky, but it's pretty cute too. It's cute spooky, which is Spoopy, as they say, I believe. Oh, this book is from Scholastic Press, and I do thank Scholastic for the permission to do this read aloud. Oh, the dedication says, "To my parents, Anastasia and Pablo Ortega, thanks for making me so wavy. And for my brother, Pablo Jr., thanks for giving me the gift of the fireflies." Chapter 1. Lightning struck, and a brilliant white light bloomed, illuminating the night sky outside Luceli Luna's bedroom window. 4 hours had passed since her bedtime, but the thunderstorm outside kept her wide awake. She tried every one of her abuela's tricks, including taking slow, deep breaths while focusing on the warm glow of the fireflies coming from outside her bedroom window. But nothing had worked. Luceli hugged her knees to her chest, gazing out the window. She counted the seconds between the flash of lightning and clap of thunder, praying that it was still too far away to strike her home. 1, 2, 3, boom! Luceli threw the covers over her head with a shriek. "Niña," a voice whispered. Luceli slid the blanket slowly from her face so only her eyes were exposed. The soft glow of one of her firefly family members filled the room. "Mama?" Luceli asked. Like water sparkling in the sun's rays, the firefly transformed before her. The translucent form rippled before becoming whole, solid. Luceli's grandmother, Mama Teresa, settled onto the bed beside her. Well, her ghost did. "¿Qué te pasa, mi niña?" Mama reached for Luceli's hand. Her touch was soft and warm, just like it had been when she was alive. Her voice always comforted Luceli like fuzzy socks and Dominican hot chocolate. "I'm scared," Luceli whispered to her abuela. Mama brushed Luceli's curls out of her eyes and kissed her forehead before beginning to sing softly, her accent thick yet clear as the sound of rain on a metal roof. "Duérmase, mi niña, duérmase, mi amor, duérmase, pedazo de mi corazón." Mama's voice wrapped around Luceli like a wool blanket, and before the song had ended, Luceli was drifting away from the storm outside and to a place that was quiet, safe. Luceli woke the next morning to the smell of white cheese frying in the kitchen downstairs. It was still early enough that the sun was beginning to flood the sky with warm orange and yellow hues, as if erasing the dark and stormy night before. She stared up at the ceiling of her bedroom, which was covered with hundreds of stars. In the daytime, they just looked like beige stickers on a white ceiling, all running together into a big blob of nothing. But when night fell and the lights were off, an intricate galaxy of constellations extended to every corner of the room. It was like having her own little universe all to herself. Luceli's father, Simon, had helped her paint the walls of her room a seafoam blue, the color of her abuela's house in the Dominican Republic. Above her desk, Luceli had a corkboard with all her certificates from school in it. On it, a calendar where she meticulously kept track of her homework assignments, and a pamphlet for the Luna Ghost Tour. Beside the corkboard hung a periodic table poster that had all hip-hop artists on it, and a portrait of the Taino rebel Enriquillo. Simon Luna was what Luceli liked to call an enormous history geek. He even started his own ghost tour company in town, and people actually paid to hear him tell stories about the history of St. Augustine, Florida. He had insisted on hanging pictures of his favorite historical figures in every room of the house. And Enriquillo wasn't the worst to get stuck with, but she would have preferred the portrait of the Mirabel sisters that was in their living room. At least it wasn't Blackbeard. Now that dude was scary looking. Though it was early, Luceli could already hear noise coming from downstairs. At first, she thought it was just the sound of her dad cooking in the kitchen, but as it got louder, she realized it was, oh no, merengue music. Lucille tried to pull the blanket over her head, but an invisible hand stopped her, flinging the comforter to the other side of the room. Que linda! Tia Milagros's voice was steeped in sarcasm as she surveyed Lucille's room. She wore the same curlers, face mask, nightgown, and slippers that she had died in. Everyone thinks dying in your sleep is the most peaceful way to go, but no one ever thinks about being stuck in their pajamas for the rest of their afterlife. Up, up, it's time to clean. This house is filthy. Look at this. She pointed at a small pile of clothes near Lucille's hamper and a solitary gum wrapper in her wastebasket. Tia, no, it's Saturday. Don't dead people get tired? Nobody can get as tired as you, sin vergüenza. Imagine being so young and having so little energy. At your age, I would have already been up for 3 hours. Fold that colcha. Tia Milagros pointed at the quilt she'd thrown, and she walked out of the room. Lucille snorted and put her chanclas on before going downstairs. She'd help clean up after breakfast. If it were up to Tia Milagros, she'd be cleaning from sunrise to sunset. Plates of hot and fluffy banana pancakes were set out on the long kitchen table. Extra crispy bacon, fried cheese, salchichon, and platters of fresh fruit sat next to pitchers of freshly squeezed juice and morir soñando. The Luna family sat around the table chatting loudly and excitedly. Well, most of them were talking. Simon was still making pancakes at their stove with one hand and dipping rectangles of cheese in flour with the other. Good morning, Mama, he smiled at Lucille. Sion, Papa. Sion, Papi. Lucille took her place at the table and took turns greeting each of her cousins, asking for blessings from each of her older relatives before digging into her plate of food. It made Lucille happy to know that even after you died, but only if you were good when you were alive, you still got to eat delicious food. If Lucille hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she'd think it was some sick way to keep her from misbehaving. But for the Lunas, it was all true. Anybody looking in through the window would see only Lucille and her father, the two living beings in the Luna household. But there were a lot more of them there. They just happened to be ghosts. Lucille's hogging all the queso again, whined Prima Macarena. She winked at Lucille before piling cheese onto her own plate. Even though Macarena had survived a life of being asked if she could do the dance, she still loved to tease Lucille any chance she was given. The 5 tias at the table shot her matching death stares. Tia Milagros reached for her chancla under the table. Lucille opened her mouth to protest, just as her dad placed another mountain of freshly fried cheese on the table. That enough food for everyone? He asked Lucille, and she nodded in response. Simon smiled, but Lucille could see the small tug of pain on her father's face. There was a time when her father could also see the family spirits in their human form, but now all he saw were fireflies. Sometimes, when your heart is too heavy and sad, he told her, you lose that part of you, that connection. It hurt Lucille to imagine the kind of heartbreak her father had been going through ever since her mom left them 4 years ago. The spirits of your dead loved ones living on as fireflies, or cocuyos, as they were called in the Dominican Republic, where Lucille's family was from, was supposed to be a myth, a story people told to ease the sadness of loss. But for Lucille, it was very real. When they weren't in their human forms, gossiping about the neighbors, or fussing over her, their firefly spirits inhabited the ancient willow tree in their backyard. Ta muy grande, Lucille. Tio Chicho went for Lucille's cheeks, but she ducked to avoid the painful Tio cheek pinch. Unfortunately for Lucille, her uncle was just as quick and snagged the other side of her face in a death grip. Ouch, sheesh! Lucille rubbed her cheek as Tio Chicho's wife, Tia Tati, slapped his hands softly, and scowled. We'll start with the bathroom downstairs, then move up to the foyer. Tia Milagros was greeted by a chorus of groans. Tia, can't we have at least one weekend off? Asked Manny, another one of Lucely's cousins. She can't help herself. Cleaning is her life, said another cousin, Benny. But she's dead, Lucely said. The table screamed with laughter now, drowning out Tia Milagros' threats. Nobody but Lucely noticed when she made good on her promise to throw her chancla by flinging it across the room and knocking over a pitcher of guava juice. No way! Milagros smiled smugly, as if she hadn't been the one to make the mess. Tia Milagros? Asked Simon. Yeah, Lucely nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. I left the cleaning stuff upstairs. Would you mind grabbing it? Simon asked. Sure. Con permiso, Lucely excused herself. As she rummaged through the hall closet in search of the cleaner that Tia Milagros insisted they only use on tile, the doorbell rang. Who could be coming over now? The only visitors they ever had were Lucely's best friend, Sid, and her family, but they never bothered to ring the doorbell. Lucely had found Sid's grandmother, Babette, asleep on their couch with a daytime court show on TV more times than she could count. Lucely heard a deep voice coming from downstairs, but couldn't make out what they were saying. She crept down the hall, trying her best to avoid stepping on the creaky spots, and crouched down at the top of the landing to peer between the thick wooden railings. The strong smell of lemon cleaner made her scrunch her nose. From her perch, Lucely could see that it was a man she recognized from the bank. I'm disappointed, Mr. Luna, the man said. I promise you we'll get caught up soon, Mr. Vincent. If I could just have a bit more time. The plea in her father's voice stung. It reminded her so much of the phone calls with her mother, of how he had begged her to come home. The answer was always the same. No. I'm afraid the most I can do is give you until the end of October. Maybe with Halloween coming up, you'll have an influx of tourists? Mr. Vincent picked a piece of lint off his shiny jacket, and Lucely's cheeks went hot with anger. All people like Mr. Vincent cared about was money. She could tell by the way he looked at her father like he was silently judging his old shoes, faded jeans, and $10 mall haircut. It was the same look the kids at school gave Lucely. Simon scratched his head, clearly flustered. Thanks. I'm sure we'll be able to manage. I do appreciate the timeliness with which you've always paid your bills, but I'm afraid with the market growing again, my only option will be to foreclose on the house. The pressure that had been building in Lucely's stomach all but exploded, and she struggled to find her next breath. They couldn't lose their house. It was the only home Lucely had ever known. It was where her parents had brought her after she'd been born, where her dad had grown up and his parents had lived before him. It was tied to every memory of her mom, and her spirit family was anchored to the willow in their backyard. If they left, what would happen to them? Her eyes watered, and she wiped at her face. Lucely's dad seemed to stand up a bit straighter, his voice steady. And I would hope that our years of responsible payment would be enough to give us a little leeway now, especially with all the work we put into the house after the last hurricane. But I guess that's not how your bank does business. Lucely smiled. Tell him, Dad. Mr. Vincent ruffled and nodded curtly. Beginning of next month. I'll be back then. Oh, and I would very much like to see your ghost tour for myself, Mr. Luna. Perhaps a rousing performance will help me convince the bank to give you a bit more time. As soon as the door closed behind him, Simon's shoulders slumped, and he let out an exasperated breath. Lucely's heart lurched. She wanted to run down and hug her dad, tell him everything would be okay, but with the way he held his head in his hands, Lucely doubted there was anything she could say to make things better. Lucely, if you're eavesdropping up there, you better come down. Lucely cringed and pulled back. How did he always know? She waited a minute took a deep breath to settle her thumping pulse, and walked down the stairs casually. Her dad hitched an eyebrow, but she tried not to show any signs that she'd overheard his conversation. He liked to pretend everything was under control all the time, and Lucille liked to let him. Act natural, act natural, act natural, Lucille repeated to herself silently. Simon Luna was an expert at sniffing out a fake. How much did you hear? Huh? I was just looking for the cleaning stuff upstairs before I heard you call my name. She crossed her fingers behind her back and tried to keep the fear of what she'd just overheard, that they might lose their home, from showing on her face. He inspected her closely, eyebrow still raised. It was like he could look into her very soul when he did that. She shifted uncomfortably, hoping he'd drop the subject. He let out another exasperated breath. That was Mr. Vincent from the bank. He just stopped by to talk about how the ghost tour was doing. Lucille winced at her father's lie. I think he might be coming to the tour tonight, so we have to make sure nothing goes wrong. He put one hand on Lucille's shoulder and squeezed gently. I'm going to go clean up the kitchen before Tia Milagros has a fit. How they can make such a mess baffles me. He laughed to himself. The moment her dad was out of sight, Lucille bolted into the small first-floor bathroom. She tried to calm her breathing and wrap her brain around what Mr. Vincent had said. They only had until the end of the month? But that was in less than 2 weeks. How much money did they owe? She knew they'd been in trouble with the bank before, but ever since the Crippleys Can't Believe It ghost tour expanded into their town, red envelopes and urgent notices seemed to be piling up. Where would they go if they lost their home? Lucille ran some cold water and splashed her face. When she opened her eyes again, her cousin Macarena sat perched on the edge of the sink. Lucille let out a small squeak before scrunching her face and throwing the hand towel right through her. I told you to stop doing that. Macarena laughed so hard that she almost fell to the floor. Even though she died before Lucille was born, Macarena was like an older sister to her, though in just a few years she'd be the younger sister. You look pale. Mama said you need to eat more, Macarena said softly. Tia saw you run in here and went back to tell everyone. You know how it is, they're just worried. Lucille arched an eyebrow. Worried? About me? Not about you. I mean, they're always worried about you, prima, but something in the air feels off. Macarena looked up as if she could see through the ceiling. And there's a weird energy. That's the only way I can describe it. A really strange energy. Lucille thought about how the storms had kept her on the edge every night for the last week, and knew Macarena was right. The others feel it too? Lucille asked. Macarena nodded and got up from the sink. Especially Mama. She hasn't been feeling well, but you didn't hear that from me. A knock at the door startled them both, followed by her dad's voice. Did you fall down the toilet, Lucy? Macarena disappeared in a blink and flew through the cracked window. Lucille opened the door. Yes. Also, I drank a lot of guava juice at breakfast. She flashed him a mischievous smile, trying to hide the worry on her face. She made her way back to the kitchen to sit among her spirit family. Her father had cleaned up the spilled guava juice, and everyone was helping themselves to seconds and thirds. Lucille kept pretending she was fine, that she wasn't freaking out about what she'd overheard, for her father's sake. And, also to avoid interrogation by her family. But as she looked at Mama Teresa from across the table, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A gasp threatened to escape her throat as she watched Mama's human form flicker slightly, like a candle whose flame was moments from going out. Mama? Lucille asked cautiously. Mama Teresa was the toughest person Lucille had ever known, and she'd never seen her spirit do anything like this. Her abuela looked up from the plate of fruit in front of her. No pasa nada, mi niña, Mama said, smiling. Everything is okay. That's the end of the chapter. And there's only 5 minutes left before we have to open the library, so I'm going to stop there, which means we will be on chapter 2, which is page 15 on Wednesday. And so, yeah, we've read 14 pages. And since I had the little introduction, we got a little bit of a late start, but we'll get through another chapter or two on Wednesday. And I hope to see you then. And I think this is really interesting so far. What do you think? It's cute, but it's also a little sad and funny. And I think it's going to be exciting too. Oh, if you have trouble understanding the Spanish words, which I'm pronouncing the best that I can, we can talk about that. But I think for the most part, if you just listen to the sentences and the paragraphs and just let the word kind of live in the sentence, it will make sense to you. You can kind of guess what it might be, like what her aunt threw across the room. I'm not sure what it was, but I'm thinking maybe a slipper, something she put on when she got out of bed, but something that can be thrown across the room, so probably not her robe. So I'm thinking something like that, like a slipper that could be snatched off of her foot. But if you know that it's something different, let me know. And we can always look up definitions of words we want to know about that we're not sure of. There's some words we'll see a lot, like tia is aunt, abuela is grandma, tío is uncle, of course, because tia and tío are very similar. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting that her family is from the Dominican Republic, and we're already learning a lot about that culture. So that's pretty cool. All right. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.